welcome to screencast 5 of the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland Introduction to Vectorworks playlist. In this screencast we're going to be looking at lines mainly. It doesn't sound a lot, but bearing in mind that quite a lot of our ground plans and technical drawings, even construction drawings start with lines. It's really important to get this right and accurate. I want to underline the fact it's far more important to have an accurate drawing. I'd rather have an accurate 2D drawing using lines than a nice rendered 3D thing that is inaccurate. A line drawing is absolutely fine. Don't get wrapped up in the 3D. A line drawing is absolutely fine if it conveys all relative information that we need. Much better to take your time and do the accurate set plan with spacings, marking out areas off stage for storage, marking out fire exits and things, all in a line drawing rather than taking ages to do it in a 3D thing, which is inaccurate. And actually, if all you need to do is mark out fire exit spacings or stage storage or masking positions, it might only need lines initially in order to plan things out. Once things have been worked out, then maybe you go and turn it into 3D, but lines are your friend. We already set the units in an earlier screencast, but the one thing we haven't set is scale. Scale's an odd one. This design layer here is an infinite space, so scale is completely irrelevant at the moment. I could draw a line here which is 1 millimeter long and have it right across the screen, or I could draw a line here which is 1,000 kilometers long and just have it filling the screen. It doesn't matter at the moment. It's kind of irrelevant until we place that drawing onto an actual sheet of paper. Then scale will become important. But for the moment, we'll work in a 1 to 25 scale, just so that we're all working in the same thing. Sorry, I pressed the resource manager there by mistake. In the top of my toolbar up here, there's a 1 to 48. Now 1 to 48 there's left over from when it was imperial units. And what 1 to 48 is not necessarily an imperial scale, but it's easier to work things out in 1 to 12 and 1 to 48 because of the way imperial units work. We want to change this to 1 to 25. If you don't see that scale thing there, and then chances are it's just not switched on. So take your little mouse right over to the far right, way over, and there's a little drop down. Hopefully you can see that there. And when you click the little drop down arrow, it's got ticks on previous next view classes, blah 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 blah, and I've got a tick on layer scale. If you can't see the layer scale on yours, chances are you don't have a tick, so put a tick on it, just click next to it, and then you should see it popping up. I think that's quite a useful thing to have in the top bar, so I've switched it on previously. I don't know whether it comes up by default or whether you need to switch it on, but either way, by now it should be on. So if I click that, and then I choose, see it's got imperial 1/4 inch there and metric. We'll just choose 1 to 25 and we'll make sure all the layers, so every layer that, if I create a new layer, it will be at 1 to 25. It sometimes it gets people into a bit of a bit mixed up if their scales, if they don't click that, they create a new layer, it's created at something else 1 to 1 or something like that, and then their drawing vanishes or appears to vanish, and it's only because the one layer is 1 to 25 and the next layer is 1 to 1. So all you've done is place a massive sheet of white paper on top of your drawing and then you think it's all gone. So tick all layers there, 1 to 25, then we should see 1 to 25 up here. All that means, I'm going to get rid of that resource manager just now because we're not using it. Just going to click it and get rid of it, the little X. If I want it back again, like any of the palettes, if I accidentally close them, window, palettes, and you can see there that resource manager isn't ticked. If I want it back, just put a tick there. Likewise, if you accidentally close down your attributes window, whoops, shouldn't have done that, window, palettes, and tick attributes, and comes back on again. I'm going to put my object information palette back in the corner there where it kind of belongs. So lines. Let's choose the line tool. The line has a constrained mode, which they are limited to angles of 90 degrees and as defined in the smart cursor settings. So that means that the lines are 90 degrees, 60, 45, 30 and back to 0 again. We can define anything we want in the smart cursor settings. There's snap to angle there. If we double click that and open up, we've got 45, 30. If I put a comma in there and a 10, it's not a comma, look, well spotted, 10, hopefully it'll understand, there. So I've put 45, 30 and 10. That should mean that my constrained lines now are 10, see how it jumped there? 30, 45, 60, and then there'll be a 80 because it's 10 less than 90 and 90. So worth noting that we can edit the constrained angles. So if you were working drawing a rake that was a rake meaning a sloping stage and it was 10 degrees, be very, very steep, but if it was 10 degrees or you were making a rake, then by setting that angle there, then it means it would be nice and simple to draw your 10 degree shape. There and there, that's it. I didn't have to draw a line and then pivot it, rotate it round. I just did it using the smart cursor settings. Looking at the lines, the unconstrained mode there, we click, it's like an elastic band. We've still got the snapping tool on, so I'll get rid of that. It's like an elastic band there. We pin it on one end and then we move around and pin on the other. And then in the object info palette, we have these two buttons here are clickable. So the second one is the one that's probably most useful for us. There's a circle with a dot in the middle. This little icon here again is clickable like the others. There we go, click the center, and that's giving me the length of the line, which doesn't change, the angle, which doesn't change, but it's the X and Y position. So the X and Y position, 237, 123. Again, if I wanted to send the center of that line to 0, there it is there, and I'll use my snap to objects and zoom out a little bit. So the center of that is now 0, 0. The other one here is a delta X and a delta Y, and that's telling me how many X units along and how many X units up the line is from the start to the end. Again, not, it might be useful, but the second one here is the one that is most useful for us. We have lines, we have double lines. Now the lines, sorry, there was one other, I missed it, the one other mode, within the lines is the center mode. So if I'm drawing a line, normally it's end to end, but the center is quite useful in the theatre, because if I am drawing a counterweight bar, for example, and I know it's centered to the stage, maybe drawing it from the center line of the stage out is an easier thing to do than drawing it side to side and then having to find the middle and move it into position. So just be aware that there are modes there for the lines. Scale factor, I wouldn't go near. I've never used it. I'm not really sure of a practical use for it, so I'm just going to note that it's there and just cancel and back right out of that just now. Someone can maybe tell me how it's useful another time. Double lines here. We have constrained and unconstrained as normal, but we notice that the double line has 4 modes, kind of left control line, center control line, right control line, and a custom control line. So the first thing we need to do is the separation. How far apart do we want our double lines? So let's say 75 mil or 3 inches apart. I'll kind of get rid of that there and just go back to the double line and note. So the left control line mode, you can see, and there's a little arrow there, so that means if I look at it, that if I click left to right, and again, a little tip, if you hold down shift, you lock. Even if I'm not on constrained, if I hold down shift, I'm locking it to one of the previous angles. So that's a good tip there. I'm holding shift at the moment. So 0. So there's my double line mode using the left control line. So as I drew it, the double line was that was the one I drew, and the second one was placed automatically 75 millimeters apart. Center control line, I'll just zoom out a little bit. Hopefully, unsurprisingly, if I draw, it'll be the center of the double line that's drawn with the lines evenly spaced between the evenly out from the center to make the 75 mil. The bottom control line, which will be the exact opposite of the one that I did here, will be as I draw that, the control lines at the bottom and the separations to the top. And this custom one here lets me define the control offset. Again, let's not worry about that at the moment. One thing we do need to think about is whether we create lines, create polygons, or lines and polygons. Now, most of the time, again, I hesitate to say all of the time, but quite a lot of the time, polygons are what we're creating. We're maybe drawing these as walls of a rehearsal room, or walls of a theatre, or bars for hanging lights on, or framing of wood flattage. So creating polygons just means that, again, pay attention to the control line mode, and I'll do that one, and it means that when I draw and I press the final click, it fills in the 2 ends and makes it a closed object. Now, closed object, if I scroll down here, is, see that little tick there in the object information palette? That's critical for when we come to working in 3D. So any objects that we create that we want to possibly turn into 3D objects at a later date should be closed. Also, a closed object can take on a color, so I could make that a color if I wanted. I couldn't do that. I can't create a color. There's no option here to create a color from these because there's no bounding lines. Going back to the color again, if you can't see any colors, chances are you've got active document set there, which means that's the colors in the active document in the document you're working in. Now I've got black and white and a blue and a yellow from things I was doing before. You'll probably just have black and white if you're just starting. You can choose classic Vectorworks colors or standard, and there's other palettes. There's all sorts of stuff down here. There's even Roscoe Scenic paints if you want to go and choose other things. Anyway, so you choose colors within there. Back to the double lines again. One thing I would urge caution is creating lines and polygons. So I'll do exactly the same as I did here and create another. Hold down shift to lock it to 90 degrees. And I'll even make it yellow as well, so they're almost identical. Now these two things look very, very similar, but they are quite different. That object there, if I select it, draw a box around it, it is a polygon. If I draw a box around this object, it is 3 objects. It is a polygon and 2 lines. You see the polygon doesn't have the bounding line there, but it's still a polygon. You really want to be careful in having objects which appear to be one thing but are actually multiple objects. If you were counting up things in your drawing, or you went to move that and then you move it and you've left two lines there without noticing, it can make your drawing messy or get things complicated at a later date. That's about it. If some people, when they've been following this in the past, haven't really understood the importance of these control lines, it's very, if I have a, say I have a space, I've gone into a rehearsal room and I've measured out the space and I want to draw the walls. If I knew it was, if I drew it like this and I went, it was like my rehearsal room, tiny little rehearsal room, a cupboard. If it was 1 meter, then I drew another kind of, we'll get into the floating toolbar in a minute. I'm just kind of showing you what can happen. If I draw it like that, I've done it really badly here, but the internal dimension of that is not the thing I measured. If I use a completely different double line and I do my measurements again from the internal measurement, then that was the internal measurement and the walls are outside it. So I drew, my clicks were exactly the same, but one of them, the control line was on the wrong side and it was putting the walls into the building, if you kind of know what I mean. It's really difficult for me to explain this at the moment. Just if you're not sure, grab me and see if we can clarify that. It should become obvious later. The control line comes into play with the walls tool as well. The walls tool there has exactly the same control line thing because it's critically important which side of the wall you're drawing. The double lines we tend not to use for walls, although you can turn double lines into walls, but at the moment I'm just showing you lots of tools to play around with. Have a go at the line tool. The next screencast is about the floating toolbar that we briefly saw there, but I deliberately didn't go into it. We'll do that in the next one. Okay, enjoy. I'll see you in the next one.